Welcome to True North Project, an odyssey to explore the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. Today's conversation is with Mark Wooding, the creator of the YouTube channel After Skool. I discovered After Skool maybe in 2017 and was immediately intrigued with some incredible content that's been brought to life through this really unique creative whiteboard animation style that Mark does. And he roped me in with some Alan Watts videos that he brought to life with his animation. But really I wanted to just meet Mark because he's a walking kind of living example of creativity, like a success story. And we talk in this conversation about, the origins of After Skool, how he got into it, how he sort of broke free from his kind of corporate gig and, the background of that and the style itself and sort of his why for doing what he does. But I really, really enjoyed this conversation with Mark Wooding, and you should absolutely check out After Skool on YouTube. Much love. If you'd like to support this project, you can do that in whatever way feels right for you. Obviously, leaving 5 stars is really useful on whatever platform you're listening to this. Subscribe, like, do all the things. We have a website, truenorthproject.com. If you want to subscribe to our email list there, you can follow along the journey, get updated on new episodes and things like that, meetups on the road and whatnot. And if you want to, other than just supporting that way, if you'd like to support us financially, the description in the podcast here has a support link that you can support us through Anchor. Any love you want to send our way is much appreciated. I don't even know if I know your last name, Mark.
Yes. My last name's Wooding. I'm not like strictly anonymous, but I don't like throw my name out there too much. I'm proud to be affiliated with After Skool and be the creator of it, but I don't want it to be about me at all. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it actually does make a lot of sense. And it sort of, when I was trying to think through, get my head straight as to what I wanted True North to be, True North Project, which is the name of, I guess, this. I kind of went through this whole soul-searching thing of everyone's trying to make a personal brand, It's like the Joe Rogan Experience or the Tim Ferriss Show or the Aubrey Marcus Podcast or something like that, And it's like there's this kind of personal branding element that goes with being a podcaster in a lot of ways. And it turned me off for some reason, because I like the idea of decoupling the personality or the person from the mission or the project or the idea, And I think, so what you've done with After Skool, which we're going to talk about, is, I think, fucking rad. And I've been watching your videos for, probably, honestly, shortly after it couldn't have been later than 2017. I think you started in 2016, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I definitely was watching your channel before you were, mega big on YouTube. I think you've got a couple million subscribers now.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's super inspiring to see somebody who's doing something that feels authentic, even though I don't really know you. It feels like you're creating stuff authentically because it resonates, and it doesn't feel like it's clickbaity. It doesn't feel like it's just for views or for clicks and or for money. And like you said, you have tried to keep the name away from your personal, it doesn't feel like you're trying to get famous. It feels like you're trying to do a thing, a project, something that you're passionate about. So one of the main reasons I wanted to reach out to you and meet you is because you're hella creative. I think you're probably one of the first YouTubers, if not the first guy, that really made the whole whiteboard animation thing come to life through videos. And that's just the medium, but you're bringing all these really dope, this awesome content to life with this medium. And so I think it's hella creative. and I wanted to sort of pick your brain and get a sense for kind of this whole story and how it played out. So with that little intro, I guess, why After Skool? Why the name After Skool?
Well, first, thanks for having me here,
Mm-hmm.
and I really appreciate you. I noticed that you were like my first supporter on Patreon almost.
Really?
And so, those first supporters are huge. And I've always had this mindset of like, anytime I was trying to do any art project or YouTube channel, just getting the first couple people to see your vision a little bit
Mm-hmm.
is so important. It's, once you get 1 million, 10 more subscribers, it's something, but it's not noticeable. But those first few that come in are everything. So I really appreciate you. You're one of my first patrons, and yeah, I couldn't have done it without supporters like you.
You probably roped me in with the Alan Watts, to be honest. I can't remember exactly when I became like a patron or whatever, but I love supporting creatives and people who are doing awesome stuff, that because it makes a difference, right? Not just even financially, but like the momentum, when somebody when you're like, oh, somebody will actually pay for this, like somebody will give me that kind of energetic support, and it kind of builds momentum, I would imagine. Not that I've experienced that with my own business, like the early adopters of people who show up and support when you're doing something like me opening a float business in St. George, Utah. It's like antithesis of what exists there beforehand. Like, we're coming in and we're making something, we're building something that nobody knows what the fuck we're doing. Like, what's a float tank? I have to explain it to everybody, right? In the early stages. And then you get those early supporters, and it does make a massive difference. It makes you feel like you're not so crazy or whatever.
Yeah. And people giving you any form of money is just like the ultimate validation. Money could be seen as the root of all evil, but it's hard to know what the truth is when you're just talking to friends and people that just say yes all the time. And they'll say, oh, of course, yeah, do it. I'd buy that. Oh, okay, then would you give me some money now? And when it's ready, no, I don't want to pay. Like,
Right.
It is like kind of a sign that you're on the right track in some ways, but it's a balancing act between staying afloat, keeping the lights on. You need money to survive in some ways, but not selling out. And I never wanted anybody to feel like I was pushing anything on them or selling anything. So I wanted it to be about the pure creation. So hopefully, if there's any After Skool listeners out there that think I've sold out, I'm sorry, but I'm promised that I get like probably a dozen emails a day for people who want to sponsor the channel. And I say no to like 99% of them, because I would not want to do that to the viewers and put a bunch of ads on the videos, because it's art to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the channel is monetized, so I'm not going to act like a saint.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't put like an in-video sponsored ad before the video started or in the middle of it.
Mm.
When you're watching the video, I want it to be like an unbroken experience.
Right. And it is an experience. And usually, first of all, your channel's kind of, I don't want to say all over the place, but there's a spectrum. A lot of what you do, it's a wide spectrum of different things that you do. And one of the things that you do is you bring these sort of sometimes monologues, sometimes dialogues between two people to life, like an Alan Watts soundbite that is powerful on its own, and then you kind of bring this like magic to it with the animation, with whiteboard animation, which I want to talk to you about, like how you do that in a little bit later. But that you don't like. I can only imagine like you're right, in the middle, in the height of an Alan Watts lecture, just getting like an ad. Like, it's the worst. Mm-hmm. It's the worst. And that was a beef I had with the Joe Rogan Experience, was like, because I think that's like, he's obviously a pioneer and crazy creator. What he's done is like untouchable, but he's shifted to Spotify, and the next thing you know, like, even though I'm paying for Spotify, I'm getting like a FanDuel ad, like right in the middle of a podcast, and it's not even recorded by him. And it's just like, that feels like sellout. It feels like just a kind of a money grab type thing, or for whatever reason. I'm not saying he's sold out. I'm saying that I wouldn't do that in my own content, right? And so I resonate with what you're saying there. Before I lose that though, like, so why the name After Skool?
Yes, that's a good question, and we kind of touched on it when we were. It's a name that that just gives me a lot of freedom to cover anything my heart desires. When I was first looking at names and then channels that I admired, I was like, okay, maybe I could be a kids channel or a science channel, and all these names kind of, I felt like I was pigeonholing myself. And with the name After Skool, it's kind of a play on words because it's Skool, and it's kind of a cool way to spell it. But I always loved learning, but I never cared much for school. So, and then the name After Skool is kind of like a place where you learn after school is over. And it's kind of like we have this idea in the West that once school's done, we're done learning. Our education's over. But in many ways, I think it just begins. You know, we're confronted with all these new truths when we leave school. And we're like, oh, wow, the real world isn't this kind of like utopia where, you know, 6th grade comes after 5th grade, 5th grade comes after 4th. You know, the world is unpredictable. And for students now, it's often chaotic to come out of that very coddled environment. So After Skool was kind of the things that you wouldn't find in the classroom.
For sure.
And, you know, it was one of those names that kind of came to me in like 30 seconds. And I was like, yeah, that works for now. I didn't know it was going to be this big thing. I literally just scribbled down the logo, took a picture of it, and that's still the same logo today. You know, did a little drawing. That's still the background of the channel, and that's still the thing that comes in at the end of every video.
And then you did that in the very beginning. That was set up.
Yeah, it's like, you know, maybe
rad.
The Nike swoosh could have taken like 2 seconds to think of.
Right.
And now that's like this iconic thing, you know?
Right.
So you never know.
Yeah. So what I love about that is you gave yourself permission to be authentic in the sense that you left it open. You used a name and a brand and an idea that allowed you to kind of be unfiltered and go after whatever you resonate with, right? So, you know, and I think that's, as a creative, that's massive, because as soon as there's a wall around, like a fence, where it's like, okay, create inside the fence, then it's like, you know, color inside the lines or something. And it kind of limits you for sure. So, I mean, I resonate with that with True North. That's, I mean, you could even say True North's like a cliche almost, because it's so subjective, you know, like if you're using True North as like the metaphor. Obviously, you could say there's an objective True North. You could say like the pyramid being aligned to True North is objectively true, because it's just like how it's astronomically aligned. And so there's that kind of realness to it. But on the other end, if you're using like, well, what is your True North, right? Like, it's very subjective. It's very much like, well, whatever my intuition points me to, whatever I get excited about, whatever helps me in my life to orient myself towards what's real, what I value most. To me, I would call it True North. And so the idea with True North Project is, I guess, it's kind of an evolving idea for me, but because when I started it, I got this idea in a float tank in 2018 to start this blog called True North Project, and it was just my excuse to quit my job, take off and travel and live out of a backpack for a year and just like go experience things, and the blog was just, you know, my excuse to go do that and maybe share what I found, right? So it was like, write about float tanks, write about yoga training I'd go do, and dive into yoga or dive into Vipassana meditation or dive into ayahuasca and like medicine retreats in South America, and that type of blog. And it was really just about discovery and exploring, and, you know, just needed to get out there. Then when I landed back in Utah, it evolved into this health discovery metamorphosis brand of like bringing modalities that I feel like actually help people do that, and trying to bring those into the physical world in a way where people can actually be in an environment like in a float tank, where you orient yourself towards not just physical health, but like emotional, spiritual health, because you start to gain this, you open up an inner door and start to gain an awareness of what's going on inside your skin, right? And because, you know, anything you experience in the float tank is something you kind of bring in with you. So that's kind of the flavor of True North, I guess, round 2. And then this new version is more about sovereignty. It's more about sovereignty and creativity. So in other words, this whole road trip that I was talking to you about before, this project of like, you know, driving to La Jolla to meet you, and, you know, like whoever else will say yes that inspires me is like giving me that excuse to chase down conversations that hopefully upregulate my sovereignty. So when I say sovereignty, I mean like awareness of like what's going on and what is, but also not just awareness, but capacity to do something, right? And autonomy to choose for yourself, right? So sovereignty is kind of like multifaceted to me. It's your ability to govern yourself, to think for yourself, to choose for yourself, but also that power to actually take action and to come from a place of inspired action. And that's kind of the sovereignty leading into authentic creativity, right? Authentic creation. And so you're on the list because I see you as an authentic creator, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's like that's in a way, After Skool has really inspired True North, like in that sense. Like it's anytime I see a creator who's inspiring by doing that thing, it just resonates out. Like you don't even have to, I don't know, it just rubs off on you in some way, even if it's unconscious. And then not to mention all the people that you might have been the first point of contact. I mean, I'm thinking of like some videos I've seen. I don't know if I knew about that guy before I saw him on your channel, you know? So like I think George Carlin might be one of those guys actually, which is funny because he's one of my favorite comedians now. So it's really cool like how you can use this like magical technology of this networking, you know, this internet, and open source these ideas. And I think, I don't know, I'm a fan of what you're doing for sure. I don't know if I was going anywhere else with that other than
Well, I really appreciate that. And I was kind of getting a visual of like a surfer when you were talking, and I like this idea that you want to be right in between you want to be balanced between chaos and order in your life. You want to be right between the known and the unknown. And oftentimes we get too stuck in the known and we retreat into our comfort zone and we don't go anywhere. We don't seek out the new experiences. And to me, I look at you as kind of like a surfer. You're right on that edge of the wave. You're right in between chaos and order. And it's like this beautiful thing. You're just feeling it out, and you don't really know where you'll be in a year, you know, but who knows where this path will lead you, but you're on it and you're just pulling this thread. And it's kind of what makes life exciting, you know, is not knowing what's about to happen. You know, we don't want predictability. We don't want the same mundane, monotonous thing every day, same route to work, same 9 to 5. You know, that's kind of an unconscious decision to get into that rut. But when we think consciously, we say, yeah, we want the adventure. You know, we want the hero's journey. So yeah, I'm excited for you. And hopefully, you know, you just chase that feeling.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I wish that I had the experiential knowledge of surfing to relate to that metaphor. 'Cause it's something that it's like on the list of things I know I got to do at some point. I'm also kind of a terrible swimmer, and I'm, you know, a little bit frightened of the ocean. Little bit.
Well, hopefully there's no surfers listening, because I don't surf either.
No,
so that metaphor might not have made any sense.
It made sense to me, and from the sense I get when I talk to surfers, I was just hanging out with a couple friends yesterday who are big into it, and it seems to be like this pure total flow state that you can kind of get into, and it is that it's riding that knife edge. And, you know, obviously the bigger the wave, the bigger the risk, the bigger the, you know, the closer you are to the edge, like the deeper you are into the deep now. I've experienced that with rock climbing. So that's been sort of my drug of choice, so to speak, for that sort of outlet into pulling you deep into the now. But yeah, I'm just a novice. Like, I'm brand new to trying to really listen to the other aspects of being a person besides just like the monkey mind, you know, and like the, you know, just straight, you know, rational logic, like, which can lead you sometimes into places like maximizing security, right? But you said something like you're in that moment, you don't know the future, you don't know what's coming next, you don't know where you'll be in a year. But the funny thing is even the people who are playing it totally safe, you know, like trying to not take risks and maybe just do the thing that, like maybe, yeah, I wanted to be an artist, but, accounting made more, like, it was just a little bit more rational, right? It was like a safe bet or something, right? My parents wanted me to go do this thing or that thing. And when you take that road, it's an illusion of safety, because there's no such thing. There's really no such thing as knowing the future, as having it mapped, as being really safe from cancer, or safe from an asteroid impact, or safe from the ocean rising and swallowing your city. Like, all those things are possible. And so to act like you're out of the danger zone or something by, just like maximizing self-interest in the long term, and maybe like just building up like a nest egg or something like that, to me that just feels like stagnation. It's like when you see a body of water that's pooled and it hasn't got an outlet, and the water stagnates and it doesn't have anywhere to move. And when water doesn't move, it just turns black and you can't drink it. There's not life. Well, there's obviously life grows in there, but I'm saying, like, it's not the type of, for the purpose of this metaphor, like, it's not like the life force that you'd want to drink. You want to go to the source where it's like the spring and it's moving, and it's like got that different quality to it. And I think we're just bodies of water, right? And so you can kind of tell when a person's kind of connected to that thing that starts to move you versus stagnating in them like a pool.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was about a million directions I thought that could have gone, and then I just defaulted to like not knowing what to say.
No, it's totally fine.
I'm not really much of a speaker. Like, for a lot of people, like, why don't you get in front of the camera? Why don't you make the channel about you, like we were talking about? And there was a few years where I was like, okay, you know what, I really need to step in front of the camera. And I don't know, I'm much more of just like a behind the scenes, like, this is kind of in my astrology, I guess. I want I don't like the spotlight, but I want my work to make a big impact.
Sure.
That's kind of like in my astrology from what I've heard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can kind of see what you mean there. Like, I totally see what you mean. I feel it's been one of the bigger hurdles for me is just getting over. I mean, the first time I remember trying to record my first podcast episode, and like I said, I'm still like brand new to this. The first time I tried to record it, I hit record and I sat in front of the mic for for like 45 minutes, without saying anything.
Really?
Just like kind of paralyzed, kind of like.
Did you have a guest?
No, the first one was just like I needed to see if I could just like sit down and record something, right? And that I wanted to actually put out in the world and share. So my first episode was just like an introductory kind of solo thing. And I think it was about like an hour and a half or something. But that took me, it was just like this big psychological barrier. Because who the fuck am I? Like, what do I have to say that's worth listening to? Like, why would somebody want to tune in to what I have to say or something like that, And,
But I think everybody has that feeling.
Yeah.
All the way up to like the very top biggest performers, everybody kind of has that, like, who am I?
And they get a bit of imposter syndrome it seems like when people get like that fame or success and notoriety, then the imposter syndrome can creep in. Like, you're getting millions of downloads or whatever, but you're still the same guy before those downloads, in a lot of ways. So it's like you kind of feel like an imposter or something like that.
In a way, it's kind of encouraging, because I've met a lot of other creators and influencers, and they all say they have the imposter syndrome, and it's kind of encouraging because you're still human. You haven't let it get to your head completely, and you're still humble in a way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of another balancing act where, like, my channel blew up really fast, and I found myself in a room with a lot of other YouTube creators at this event called VidCon, and I was just like, oh my god, there's this guy, I've seen his videos, and there's this guy, and I was like starstruck. And then some of them came up and said, oh, I've seen your videos, and I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing in this room, but I've gotten a little bit better at like kind of owning it without kind of
letting it get to your head.
Yeah. And I get humbled all the time, so that's good.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's it's humbling to me that you said yes to this conversation, because frankly, you've got like a couple million subscribers on your channel. I think I looked it up today. You had like over 145 million views across time on your channel, and like if you, those are just numbers, but like if you were to imagine like 145 million people, or like even if you just said 2 million people, like your subscribers, right? 2 million people in a stadium, well, that's not possible.
That's insane.
It's too big.
Yeah.
It's too many people to fit in a stadium, right? So it's a crazy amount of people, and obviously with the internet and the world, like you see that kind of stuff now, and it's just really it's really cool that you've connected with an audience, you've got your stuff out there, you're able to kind of hopefully just keep doing this thing and creating authentically, and it's just humbling and super rad to me that when I reached out to you and hey, I want to kind of help, I want to sort of tell your story a little bit, I want to meet you and talk to you about this. You said yes, and so it's like, and I'm frankly nobody. You know what I mean?
You're somebody for sure.
Well, what I mean by that is like I'm not bringing a large audience to this conversation. You see what I mean?
That's
like,
probably why I said yes.
which is cool. Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. So,
because I said yes to this one podcast, and I didn't think it was going to be that big, but apparently it was pretty big.
Oh yeah.
And like my uncle heard it. He's like, "You were on this show?" I was like, "Thank God I didn't know it was that big when I went on."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess that kind of that's the weird thing too. It's like when I froze in front of the mic the first time when I was just trying to start. It's like when you know that there's going to be a lot of people tuning in, then it does sort of change your orientation a little bit. Kind of messes with your mind a little bit. I'm sure. I mean, I've never been on a huge stage like that, so I don't know. But I'm sure it would. Like getting on the Joe Rogan Experience or something would be weird. It'd feel different for sure being in the hot seat, I'd imagine. So you did a video with for Simon Sinek's Start With Why, which I read that book. It's a great book. And so what's your why for After School? I know you've kind of described sort of like why you picked the name, and that gave me some inclination as to what the why was, but maybe you can just talk a little bit about like what drove this whole project, what got it started, and what's the why?
Well, a principle that I really come back to quite a bit is called Ikigai. It's a Japanese principle. You probably know. You smiling?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up.
And I think that is a really useful tool to understand your why and orient yourself. And it's really quickly, it's what you're good at, what you love doing, what the world needs, what you'll get paid for. And if you're missing any one of those four circles, you're not going to, something's going to be off. And it's very hard to recognize within yourself, but it's very easy to see in others. When you can see a really rich lawyer who's miserable and, they don't love what they're doing. Maybe the world doesn't need it, so they feel kind of empty inside. Or there's a lot of people who have big hearts and are trying to do these humanitarian charity projects, but they're not, they're broke and they're like frustrated. And, you kind of have to bring it into that center, to the sweet spot. And that's kind of where your why is. And if you just shoot down that sweet spot. So anytime I felt out of balance, I'm like, okay, this is a great passion project and all, but you kind of need to turn it into a lucrative business. You have an employee, you have somebody depending on you now. You have to actually provide for them. So yeah, that's probably the best thing I can think of as to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing model for finding meaning in life, I think. And I mentioned sovereignty, I mentioned creativity, but Ikigai is actually sort of the third pillar of that trinity for True North. I like this model of the trinity sometimes to think about things, and one way that I've used that is this trinity of being, doing, and becoming. These sort of three modes of being that kind of feed into each other, right? So for me, I like to think of like being as, be sovereign. Like that's the state of being I want to embody. I want to be a sovereign kind of agent that can blaze my own trail. And then I want to do or create authentically, and whatever that looks like. And that's one of those things that's probably impossible to fully imagine where it takes you. Because, if you sort of give in and you authentically, ride that wave, then it's gonna, I don't know, maybe it'll bring you to millions of subscribers, maybe it'll bring you to something else, right? And then the third mode of becoming, like, that's ikigai. That's like orienting yourself towards that thing that is your reason for being. That, yeah, like you said, it's not just a vocation to make money. It's also what you're passionate, what you love to do, and it's what the world actually needs. So there's it might not be a thing that's fully formed now, obviously. Right.
You're always kind of harnessing it and getting closer to that sweet spot. You're kind of like spiraling around. And, before I started After School in 2016, I had probably 3 of those pillars covered quite well. I was doing animation as a freelancer, and I was pretty good at it. I was getting paid to do it. I started to love it a lot less. Creating for other people just to make somebody else happy it gets a little, I wouldn't say it's soul crushing. It's still a great job and I wouldn't complain about it, and I can always go back to it, but you have all these visions and ideas in your mind and you want to like bring them to life as an artist, and kind of trying to make the same corporate video, it gets old. And then you're like, does the world really need one more corporate HR animation? And I didn't feel like it, I didn't feel like my work was having the impact that it could have. And, you spend 2 months on a video and maybe a couple hundred people will watch it at some corporate retreat. That doesn't really feel that great when people are like, maybe the best reaction will be like, oh yeah, that video is really nice.
Right.
But yeah, I just had this like calling to make something that had a much bigger impact. So I gave myself a year, kind of like you're giving yourself a year on this project, to just say, okay, and just say no to the money, stop chasing money, and just kind of give yourself a year to pursue that meaning and do something that is more of a passion project. And just, you're going to live hopefully 80 years. In that 80 years, you want to look back when you're 80 and say, at least I gave myself 1 year to pursue something that I loved. And yeah, kind of owed it to myself, owed it to the world, and, owed it to life to just give it a chance.
So walk me through, was there a particular catalyst maybe, or an experience or an event or anything that was sort of the pushed you over the edge, was sort of the shift or the transformation from, more of the corporate gig to more of the after school gig? Like, and how did that go? I think a lot of people are in that pre-shift phase. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where they're in that transitory mode. A lot of people are trying to, find the inspiration or the balls to do it, who have the money, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or they have the bandwidth, they have the freedom. There's a lot of people without the money who are going for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, it reminds me of I have an artist, little sister, who's just gung-ho going for it, and it's so cool. It's so cool to see. It's inspiring because she's just totally trusting the universe in a lot of ways, right? Like, it's not like she did this after, building up like a $100,000 cushion or something like that, so that, you feel like you can manage, you have a buffer to manage the risk or something like that, right? And then you have a job, you can go back to, or a skill set like freelancing you can go back to or something. So there's a lot of people who are really taking risks, but then there's a lot of people who are kind of, paralyzed, or like they might be wondering, like, how do I go from here to Mark or after school or something like that they see as like a successful, like a success story. So in your story, was there something that helped you make that shift or transition, that mindset shift?
Yeah. Sometimes you can get in this like comfortable zone where things are good, but they're not great. And in order to become great, like maybe this is a good rock climbing analogy where you've kind of climbed high, but you're not at the top of the mountain, but you're at a point where you can't go any farther. And that in order to get to the top, you're actually going to have to go down quite a bit.
Right.
And find a new route to the top. Mm-hmm. And that process of going down is very hard. It's painful because you've made a lot of progress, but you can't go any farther. You're at a stopping. You're cut off.
Right.
So that going down, it hurts. And it's very uncomfortable. And so sometimes that going down process has to be forced upon us, kind of like COVID for a lot of people was this big thing that just made them very uncomfortable. But through that discomfort, they shifted their life path greatly. And, you know, in years' time, we'll look back on this and say, wow, thank God that happened. You know, I would have never, for me, I moved down to San Diego because of it. I was always I lived in San Francisco before, and I was sitting there like, oh, you know, I really want to move, but I was pretty comfortable up there. You know, I had friends, everything was worked out. And that was the thing that pushed me out the door. So similarly with After School, things were going fine. I was a freelance animator, had a lot of clients, and I got screwed over big time on this big project. And it was for a presidential candidate in 2016. And I didn't want to do the project, but I was like, you know, it's just a job. Just do it. You know, it's for a paycheck. That was kind of the mindset, like just get this done at the time. And, you know, not only did I not want to do that project, but I didn't get paid for it. They kind of said, you know, we're not going to use this and we're not going to pay you. And that was summer of 2016. And in that moment, a couple of things kind of came together at once. But getting, you know, screwed over kind of pushed me out the door and said, all right, you know what? You know, why are you doing this? You know, at least if you're not going to get paid anyways, at least do something you want to do. Right? Mm-hmm. Like you can fail at doing something you love, or you can fail at doing something you don't want to do. Mm-hmm. I'd rather fail at doing something I love doing, you know? So, yeah, then it was just kind of born out of intuition. And the first few videos I did were kind of like a response to what had happened, where I was like very like anti-capitalist, and you know, in the first videos, I almost kind of want to like take them down at this point, because I've evolved a lot since then. Mm-hmm. But I was all over the place. You know, in the beginning, I was kind of trying to chase what was popular. And I was saying, okay, what is that channel doing? Okay, how many views did they get? Okay, so I was trying to chase things. And eventually I kind of honed in on that Ikigai model and said, okay, stop chasing. You know, just find your sweet spot. And, you know, you can't be tone deaf. You have to listen to what's going on. You have to be aware of what's going on. You can't live in a completely isolated bubble. But, yeah, it's just about staying true and staying authentic, and things will come to you more. You won't have to chase.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. So that's an interesting, it's an interesting experience that, you know, it was, it's just a sour deal, so to speak, that, gave you that push to go, you know, to move on. But also it seems like in the field you were in and the work you're doing in animation, it's already, like you were saying, checking a lot of the boxes, and it's a creative sort of venture for you that you're interested in, that you're, I guess what I'm wondering is, like, how long have you been an artist in the medium of animation? Was the style different? Did you change it for After School? And, you know, when did you know you were an artist, that you wanted to do this, right? And, you know, get on that creative path. Because there's a lot of people who, you know, maybe switching from what they're doing to what they really want to be doing, it might not be as simple as one type of creative work to like a more authentic type of creative work. It might be like, oh man, I got to go way down the mountain and I got to go like learn a skill that I know I want to, like, or I might just not even know where to go, and I'm trying to like just get into exploration mode. But is there anything that have you, just from the beginning, did you know, like, you've always just been an artist, or is there something else that you kind of had to discover that, or something like that?
I think, yeah, I've been I've been blessed and unblessed in certain ways, where I've always been good at art. Like, I was drawing before I could even walk. My parents would kind of throw down a pen on a piece of paper, and I would like slug myself over and start drawing. And I didn't know that I was a good artist until my parents put one of my art pieces, they submitted it to some museum in San Francisco, and it won first place for Best Youth Art Piece of the Year.
Wow.
And I'm like 4 years old, and I get a trophy that's like a foot taller than me, and it's just this big thing. And I was kind of like, whoa, that was a big validating point. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm an artist. And I wanted to be a professional soccer player for quite some time, but that wasn't my thing. You know, I was I was going to be an artist, I guess. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty rare story, because I think a lot of people, even though they might be born oriented that way, the environment that they're born into can shut that down for a lot of people, you know. I mean, I just think that's super cool that you were born into a space where, for whatever reason, that gift got cultivated in some way, versus like shut down or not recognized, or, you know, like having parents that put this stuff in front of you and let you draw and like put you in competitions or whatever it is that gets that thing going. I think that's important, because it feels like, and this is kind of validating this idea, kids come into the world kind of with something to offer already, you know,
right?
Like kind of lit up, like connected, and having this, having something that they have to share, you know. And so it's like, kind of, as an adult, for whatever reason, as you grow up, that connectedness kind of goes away. We forget the environment that we're in might orient us more in the direction of what something more logical, or something more down to earth, you know,
right.
or you know, something more real, like, you know, you got to make money, you got to pay the bills, right? And so now you're bagging groceries, or now you're flipping burgers or something, and it's like a grind to get by, and you end up in some sort of weird vicious cycle where, you know, you got to keep making money to spend money, and work. Is there ever time to actually cultivate the thing? And before you know it, you forgot you had the thing,
right?
And the curiosity's gone, and the, you know, the intuition's silenced. And so it's really cool that, like, there's people who have, you know, got the roots all the way back to the beginning, and it's kind of kept it alive. And then there's also really cool stories of people like getting shocked awake, you know, and remembering. Like, to me, I feel like that's what happened. That's more of my story. And it was with the catalyst of like some psychedelics that helped me reconnect, and a float tank, some floating experiences that have helped me reconnect. So there's tools for catalyzing those types of insights and reconnecting experiences. But yeah, I think it's super cool to see people who are already kind of, I don't know, like they've been able to cultivate that for their lifetime, you know?
Yeah, there's an idea that you reminded me of. I've seen this quote from many philosophers, from Carl Jung to Seneca to even Carl Sagan, where like the purpose of childhood is to become an adult, and the purpose of adulthood is to rediscover the child you left behind. So like, I like this idea where, you know, children kind of have this great imagination. They live in the moment. They kind of like dance through life, and as adults, we envy them for that. But it's critical that you move out of that phase, because a child is all potential, but they are nothing. You have to become something. You have to like manifest that potential into something. You have to go through like an apprentice. You have to train, learn, practice, and become good at something. You can't just sit on that potential forever. That's how you get kind of like an overgrown man-child. And, you know, people don't want to put up with that.
Right.
That's the story of Peter Pan. And but once you kind of go through this training phase and you become something, like let's say you become an architect, well, then you don't want to be an architect and design these really boring square buildings. You want to be a master architect and go back to that child you left behind, and then merge that imagination with capability. That's where the magic happens, when you merge those two. And then you design these incredible buildings that are, you know, make people in awe. And you can do that in any field.
Yeah, it's kind of plays on the idea we talked about with the writing between order and chaos, but it's this sort of this dualistic sort of force, I think, where one being force, one being kind of non-force, right? Or like
it's all about balance.
Yeah. There's this idea of Wu Wei that Watts talks about quite a bit. It's Japanese kind of Zen Buddhist idea. I think that's Wu Wei is kind of like non-doing, and to me, I mean, even though kids are obviously, they do stuff, they're playing, they're in it, they're not doing in the sense of like force, like I have to go to work, I have to go do this. It's more just like it's a happening, like it's this thing that's just playing out like a dance, right? And so like having the two things together is important because you might need to cultivate some discipline and a skill and put in the time and learn and exert yourself and overcome tough challenges and obstacles. And like the first time I remember trying to rock climb for the first time, I was like, this is impossible. Like I can't stay on the wall. Like I can't even hang on to the holds. And I'm looking at other people like upside down, just like little spider monkeys on the wall. And it's like, no, this is impossible. But if you exert yourself, you dedicate yourself, and you can imagine a future in which you can actually climb, then you can actually make it a reality. So it takes the imagination too, right? And not just the force and the doing. It's kind of this balance between the two things. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit because you've animated some really dope content. So I want to talk a little bit about your style, and then I want to go into the content itself. So the style, I get the sense that I guess you'd call it whiteboard animation. I don't know if that's the proper term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of, okay. And I get the sense it's kind of like a time lapse with a camera and as you sort of draw on a whiteboard, right? So there's some video editing involved. Do you want to speak a little bit about like the technique and how you got into that particular medium or that style of animation? Has it always been your flavor? Like how did you transition from drawing on, maybe drawing and painting as a kid to animating using computers, I don't know if you're using like a stylus or like, and then now you're just like actually drawing on a whiteboard, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, I wasn't the best artist in school, but one of the things that always shocked people was I was really fast. Like I could draw something just incredibly fast, and it was like to a point where I'd be pretty satisfied with it. And then I'm like, somebody's spending 30 hours on the same drawing, and their end product might look better, but I did it in 10 minutes. So yeah, I do things really fast, and that lends itself quite well to that animation style because those drawings aren't like oil paintings.
Right.
They're I pretty much get them to the point where the viewer can recognize, oh, okay, I know what they're showing there. I always try to take it farther each video and make the art, more in depth. But the whiteboard animation style, I first came across it in like 2009, maybe 2010, and I thought it was so cool because it kind of merges all these different learning styles into one. You are watching somebody draw, so it's not really a traditional animation. There isn't, the movement is in the unfolding of the creation. The characters don't move. The drawings are static. You're just watching somebody draw. So it's not really even technically an animation. And I thought it was going to be like a fad. It was really popular for a little while. And it's still around, which is interesting. And I think my style is stands out because it's my original art. I'm not using a software or anything. It's all done on a whiteboard with Expo dry erase markers. So it has this unique feel, and like there's a lot of programs that you can put in like clip art or vector art, and some digital hand will kind of like follow a line, and that looks really unnatural. Whereas like with mine, you can see the shadows, you can see like this is an actual hand on a whiteboard. So it has more of a real feel, and it combines all those learning forms. It's visual, I'm writing the text out, so it's written, it's audio. And then in a way, you kind of feel like you're experiencing it. You feel like you're doing it because you can kind of see, maybe that's my hand. Mm-hmm. So it stuck around longer than I thought. And I'll keep doing it until like, it's just like a completely dead horse.
Well, to your point about the unnaturalness of the kind of software version of this, I've never connected with any of that stuff. Like, because you see a lot of people try to do it, like, especially, I've seen it a lot more, like, for corporate stuff. People try to use that style with software and try to, like, animate things for their businesses and stuff like that. I've had some people try to do that, like, reach out and try to make these types of videos for my business. And it just doesn't feel like art, really, to me. It doesn't feel like the same type of thing. Whereas when you're watching, like, something like you do, I think you're right. It's technically not animation. Now I think about it, but it feels like it pulls you in because you're like watching this thing grow, like you're watching this thing come to life, and it feels so like real, organic. It's just like it's just blank white, and then all of a sudden here comes this
It's a little
story.
bit like what you're doing with your band. You know, it's like, what's next? What's going to come next?
Yeah, that's kind of true. Like, I couldn't tell you exactly what's next at all. Like,
but I'm curious to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
You keep me updated.
Yeah, for sure. I will. I have about a list of about 100, 150 people that has just been sort of like a brain dump of like throw on anybody who's interesting that I would love to meet and talk to, and I think that's realistically maybe gonna. I mean, this is total speculation, but I think realistically that might make up something like 50% of the conversations. I don't know if I don't think I'll make it through everyone on the list, but I'm saying like people who I'm like, for example, this conversation where I'm sort of like initiating it, trying to meet you. That's probably gonna be half the conversations. And then I would imagine the other half of the conversations are going to be people I don't have any idea about yet. You know what I mean? Where like I meet them kind of through coincidence or some sort of synchronicity, or they're referred to me by like somebody else or something like that. And it's like when you're doing something in the van and in person, you open yourself up to like a whole bunch of random kind of shit that can happen,
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm just in my office in front of Zoom, no one's gonna do a Zoom podcast with me unless I'm like emailing them and like reaching out to them. And so it's gonna be a lot more. I think this way, hopefully, it opens up the door to just new possibilities, right? And it brings in a little bit of that chaos element into it, where you don't know what the final form's gonna look like, right?
Right.
And so in a year, I don't know exactly what my life will look like or what my worldview will be, because it's going to be kind of shifted and affected by conversations that I have with kind of who knows exactly, right? But hopefully they'll all resonate. Hopefully it'll all be like how you tried to only create content that feels like it uses at first. You kind of had to hone in on that. Maybe it was like, what will get the most views, or what are other people doing? And then, it gets closer and closer to the thing where it's like, what do I want to tell here? Like, what do I want to show people here?
It kind of transformed into like, what is the video that I would want to watch the most? It's kind of like the ultimate selfishness becomes the ultimate selflessness.
That's a perfect way of describing.
In a weird way. Like I stopped worrying about anybody else, and I was like, okay, what video do I want to make, and what do I want to watch? And what's the art that I want to create, and what's the art that I want to see? And I kind of like tuned out a lot of the noise, and oddly enough, that resonates with a lot of people.
It feels more real.
Yeah.
I think that's why podcasts have blown up, and that's resonating with people, because like it's the exact opposite than, like if I'm like a news station or something, everything's based on like, polls and like what tests well, like what do we want to show people that will get engagement or whatever. And, it's all kind of artificial. It's like a stage, kind of trying to keep people engaged and stuff. Whereas a podcast feels more like, this is just two people and they're just talking, right? So whatever they talk about, and it's not necessarily like it's kind of like got that emergent property that your animation, or I keep using the word animation, but your art has, right? It's like an emergence, like it's just happening, and it's not just that the art style itself is emerging on the whiteboard, but like the videos that are coming out of your channel are emerging out of you based on like what you're into and like what inspired. Like that's a good question. Like how do you curate that content? Like what's your sort of do you have anything you can speak to about like why do a project with Randall Carlson or Graham Hancock or the ones that you've, like, just these videos that you've made, right? Like why these videos, and like how do you come to that decision?
It depends on a couple of factors. While I'm making a video, I'm listening to other things all day long, like podcasts or other things, audiobooks, and I come across like there's no end to good,
right,
awesome ideas. So usually when I come across a great speaker or somebody with a bright idea, I'll say, okay, let me send him an email. For example, there's a comedian named Tim Dillon who I love him right now. I just think he's so funny.
He's hilarious.
And just yesterday, I was like, you know what? Who knows? Maybe there's a way he can get on After School. So I sent his team an email, and they said, first thing is getting permission. And they said, that sounds like a really cool idea. So that was, let's see how open they are to, maybe 1 out of 100, it's very rare, are not open to it. I mean, I don't know why somebody wouldn't want an animation to honor their words.
Right.
But, occasionally that happens. So you just want to make sure that you have their blessing. And then from there, you see how into it are they? Do they want to do a full-on collaboration where we're working together on something? Or, we can do it where it takes no effort on your part and I'll just animate something already existing.
Right.
Which I'm surprised that I haven't seen other animators do this. It's so weird. Like, I'm like the only animator that will animate other people's audio. It's just kind of, I thought it would blow up, and I thought I wasn't doing anything that original. But
well, your channel blew up, but
yeah.
But I agree. It seems like the obvious play.
But most animation styles take a long time. Like at Pixar, doing 1 second might take an animator 4 days of that Pixar high quality animation. So, of 4 days of really intensive work. So fortunately, the whiteboard style, I can crank out a 10-minute video in 2 weeks. Like 50 hours a week. Like, it's still very labor intensive, but I can get these videos done, and I put out a video every 2 weeks, and that's about as fast as I can get them out.
So that's a 10-minute thing. That's not a couple seconds,
Right, right. Exactly.
That's and you're doing it. I mean, how big is your? If you don't mind me asking, how big is your? Do you have a team of people, or is it? I mean, I know you're primarily the artist, so I'm saying, like, are you getting assistance with some back end stuff, or is it just kind of like one man show and you can pump out 10-minute video in 2 weeks?
So I do the creative stuff, and in the beginning, that's all I was doing was the creative stuff. But as the channel got bigger and bigger, there's so much more to manage. You have like all these emails and requests and sponsors and contracts, and it's too much to deal with. And then you have to manage the social media. And so fortunately, I have a very long-time friend who is helping me now, and we're working on this together, and he's doing the social media management. He's setting up After School on all these alternative platforms, and he's just working on a bunch of things that are things that I couldn't manage on my own, which has been nice to have help. And I've had a couple other people help me, but right now it's pretty much just a 2-man operation.
Sweet. Yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool that's like that you can have that type of reach and impact, and you can connect with that wide of an audience with like 1 to 2 people. Like that's like it just speaks to how crazy of a time we're in right now.
Yeah, there's a couple channels that I really look up to that have like teams of over 100 people, and for a while I was like, okay, you could be this guy that works in complete solitude, and you can be this YouTuber, or you can create like a big empire. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to hire a bunch of people and build a big team. So I got really interested in bringing people in, and that kind of, that's not my strong point, is like managing people, and that just got to be more work than I could even wrap my mind around. So after, that was much more of a headache than it was productive.
Yeah.
So 2 people is about as much as I can handle.
It's lean. It's lean. And there's this like kind of idea in business, as you scale up, the architecture itself starts to take, it becomes less efficient and effective, and it starts to kind of, you lose heat in the system. There's friction in the system, so to speak, bureaucracy, hierarchy, and you're communicating ideas across different teams of people. And how do you make sure that the idea of the creator or the visionary trickles down to the people at the bottom, so to speak, right? And it's a challenge, right? Like right now, I'm trying to. I mean, I feel like I have a great team. I have a few people who are part of our team, True North Float, and it's rad to be able to be here with you on the West Coast, while the float center is still operational.
Awesome.
You know what I mean? That's like, it allows me to do the thing that is starting to really, is like calling me, right? But Yeah, I feel you, man. Like the idea of having like an empire of float centers, it's like that's just gonna eat you up. It's just gonna eat you up.
Yeah, it's all about balance. It's like when is enough? So like at this point right now, you could say, okay, when I have this, I'll be done. And then you get to that point and you're like, no, I want more.
Yeah.
It's so hard to, and I've done this so many times where I say, when I get to 1 million subscribers, everything's going to change. And then I get to 1 million, I'm like, well, might as well keep going.
Yeah.
It's so hard to just get off the train.
So what train are you currently on? Like, what is your goal for the channel, or maybe longer term milestones? And how do you see like the kind of bigger picture of, your vision for after school? And or is it finite? Is it kind of, does it have an end point? Is it going to evolve to something different? Like, have you thought much about like long term?
There's a few long-term projects that are kind of always going to be there that I'm going to get to in time. But for right now, I'm not burnt out on creating at all. I was just in a creator meetup with a bunch of Patreon creators, and the whole gathering was focused on the idea of burnout. And all these creators were saying how burnt out they were and how stressed and how much anxiety. And I feel for them for sure, and that's a real thing. But I kind of was sitting there like, we're creators. I mean, this is, if there's no passion, if you're not having a blast doing it, then I'm not so sure. I'm not burnt out at all, and so I feel energized for every project. And I'm, I have this like, let's say my friend tells me to come out to a bar and he's having a birthday party. I'll be at the bar, because it's proper to celebrate their birthday. But, half the time I'm thinking, God, I wish I was just at the whiteboard making that video.
Yeah.
So I still have that strong hunger to keep making these videos. And, yeah, so for now, that's the plan, is just to keep making videos. And what the cool thing is, I'm getting connected with people that I really admire. And so we're forming deeper relationships. And in the early days, I was kind of like begging people to work with me. And now things are kind of flipping where it's either like collaborative or they're coming to me. So, I'm kind of just riding this wave, and I like where it's going. And the cool thing is, like, a lot of these business models where somebody just started a creative project out of intuition and didn't really know where it was going, it's kind of cool to see how much it gets worth later on. Like Joe Rogan, he's just, he was interviewing his friends, and it turned into this big thing. There's another guy I watch occasionally named Pat McAfee. He's a sports guy. I used
to be a Colts fan back in the day. I'm familiar with Pat. Yeah, he's a punter.
Yeah, and like I just heard that he like did a podcast deal worth $130 million or something.
Damn.
And I'm like, wow, that guy's just talking smack about sports in his garage or something.
Which is probably what he really loves doing, or he enjoys at least, because it's connected with other people, right? He's enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, so it's like, when you're creating these things out of intuition, you don't really know what the value is, but it is valuable, and it kind of swells up like this balloon. And yeah,
I think authenticity is a key ingredient. So like you can have the creative that's burned out, but he's still doing, you'd call the work creative. Like, somebody like pumping out logos for all these different businesses, right? Like they're doing good work, right? They might be making good logos, but if it's seen as work and you're not connecting necessarily with your vision or your dream, or maybe, and there's ways to do that probably where it's very authentic, where you're working with brands that you're very passionate about and you're super excited to help them bring their vision to life, right? Like I think about my experience with my friend Kenzie, who I met super synchronistically and randomly in Colombia. I took a flight on a whim from the north coast of Colombia down to Medellin in the mountains, and it was just totally like
all intuition.
100%, man. Like, and I'm not just saying that to say it. Like, it was so weird. I was at a cafe in Cartagena, and I'm like, I'm gonna. I was going to stay there for like 2 more nights. I had this hostel booked for 2 more nights. And I'm like, nah, I'm going to go to Medellin. I just want to get out of here. I want to go to Medellin. It was kind of hot. And I'm like, I'm just going to go down to the mountains. I'm going to see what happens. And and Medellin was like a place I really wanted to visit. So I book a flight like right away, and on the receipt in like Colombian pesos is like 4 or 5 sixes in a row or something, like on my receipt in my email. It was really weird. It's just like all these sixes. I was like, okay, weird. And then I when I get there, it's a side tangent. There's a funny story. Like the guy that I get there and there's no Uber, so no data really, barely any service, no Uber there in Colombia at the time, and so I'm going to get a taxi, and this Colombian guy walks up to me and he's like, "You need a taxi?" And he speaks almost no English. I'm like, "Yeah." So I follow him, and we walk past all the taxis, and we keep walking like out to the parking lot, keep walking like past like to this far off parking lot. There's this like tiny little beater, like piece of shit car, and his girlfriend's in the front seat, kind of waiting for him. And so he just kind of like scalped me from the airport, like give me a ride or whatever. And so I'm trying to communicate him where I'm going, and because he doesn't have a phone, he doesn't have directions, he doesn't know like, and there's like a huge language barrier. I don't speak any Spanish, so I'm like trying to use Google Translate and Google Maps and trying to like communicate to him where to go while I'm in the backseat of this tiny little 2-door like clunker, and we're like bombing down the freeway. And then he lights up a joint in the front seat while we're on the highway, and he just like passes it back to me. And for some crazy reason, I hit the joint. Like I was like,
I think at that point you had to, right?
Yeah. At some point, I just hit it, and then like it all dawned on me right as I got high. I was like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, why did I hit this joint from a stranger in a city that I've never been to, in a language I don't speak, and I don't know where I am?"
I think you had to.
Yeah. So that was a crazy weird moment. Probably not a good advice to just take joints from strangers, but he takes me to this hostel that I just kind of picked, and that's where I met Kenzie, and I met her that night, and we ended up her and another friend that I'm still really good friends with, Simon, we lived at that hostel for a month and formed a friendship. She got kind of a glimpse of what my idea for True North was, and then formed this connection. And then when I finished up my travels, I don't know, 8-9 months later, landed in St. George. She flew out to St. George and worked with me for 2 weeks, and we brought True North to life as a brand. So she's like behind the logo, and she's behind. It's not just like a logo. Like, it's funny. I was watching your video about the story of creation and sacred geometry, and without trying, without knowing what we were doing, the seed of life sort of emerged in this logo, and it was really kind of cool to be part of, because it felt like a thing separate from either one of us, but when we worked together, it kind of came out. And anyways, I was just really thrilled with everything around the brand work that we did. So, and she was too. So that's just an example, kind of tangentially. That's an example of how somebody can be helping someone else create with their own creativity, and it can feel authentic, and it can be really a cool collaboration, right? Like with what you do with, helping other people, collaborating with like someone like Alex Gray, where you like did a video with him recently that was spectacular and really showed kind of his body of work, not just with the artwork, but like with him speaking this incredible, almost poetic kind of like, I don't even know what to call it, but his kind of story of, everything.
What it means to create.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That was a surreal experience, because I'm a big fan of Alex Gray, and I've loved his artwork for a long time. Like ever since I first saw it, I was like, yeah, that guy captured the psychedelic experience. That's the best presentation of it I've ever seen. And then his team reached out to me, and I was like, oh, wow, Alex Gray wants to do an after school thing. And when I first heard his idea for the video, it kind of went over my head, but I'm like, this is Alex Gray. You don't say no to his ideas.
No.
And so like, I probably watched it like 2 or 3 times, and by like the third time I was like, wow, this is a powerful message. So unfortunately, I mean, not that many people watched that video. It's probably my least watched video of the last few years, but I stand by it 100%. And it's one of those things that I'm like, I'm really happy with it. And anybody that's watched it, I've gotten a great response. So that's another thing with YouTube, is like, you just do the best work you possibly do. You put it out there, and then you kind of just, you can tear your hair out if you're trying to compare views and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And like, I've been in a bit of a slump lately, and I'm aware of it. I'm like, all right, we're gonna get out of the slump. But
and by slump, you mean like downturn in views or something?
Yeah, there was a period during the pandemic where I think internet traffic was just through the roof, and it's probably still is, but my channel was just like I could put out anything and it was getting a couple million views. It was pretty insane.
Right.
So, and that's just the way the algorithm is. Sometimes you're like the golden boy, and then other times you know you're in the doghouse. So, you know, I'm not gonna complain. Like I still have a huge following, and each video is getting like on the low end like 200,000 views.
Like in Alex Gray videos, like at least over 100,000 views, right?
Yeah. And that's probably the lowest in the last few years.
Right. And so it's all perspective, because if you and Alex Gray got in a room and, you know, 100,000 people wanted to see what came out of that and like were watching, if you saw 100,000 people, you'd be like, holy shit.
Like in the beginning, if I got 100,000 views, that would have been mind blowing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's definitely
nothing to complain about.
Right. And honestly, it almost, because I don't think that views are a correlation of necessarily of they are signal, and it's shows you, you know, something. Shows you something. If some people want to watch it, and if it might show you, like you said, might be the algorithm, might be showing you something about the algorithm, might be showing you something about kind of like the state of the collective, like is this COVID or not, right? And so there's a lot of different variables. It's probably too complex to know it all, but I don't think it necessarily shows you just pure like the signal of the thing itself, like the pure quality. And you got like Gangnam Style getting like 1 billion views and shit like that, right? So there's not like a one-to-one correlation there. And there's been some people that I've discovered who are so like under the radar, like furthest thing from mainstream, that have totally just like blown my mind, reshaped how I see the world, like in major ways. And so I don't think that, you know, how big, how popular, how many views is necessarily that big of a deal. So yeah, I think your video with Alex Gray was one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is something though. Like when a video does go viral, you look at it and you're like, yeah, that makes sense now. You know, it like the the video I made earlier this year on mass psychosis. That has like 5 million views, I think, maybe more. And like when I remember when I read the script for that, I got like chills, because I was like, this is powerful.
Yeah.
Like, and like I know it's gonna be good when I can see a visual for like every sentence. It's like yearning for visuals. Like sometimes it doesn't really come to me, and it almost feels like a little forced. There's only certain, you know, not every topic lends itself to animation.
Right.
But for this one, I was like, okay, my style of animation is really good for conveying like kind of complex, deep ideas in a very kind of digestible manner. You know, because you have the art is very approachable, but then we can talk about really deep things. And so I think that's why that style caught on, is because you can talk about like very intense things, which that mass psychosis video did. Right. It really touched a nerve on like what the world's going through right now. And I just finished a kind of a sequel to that with the same group, Academy of Ideas.
Yeah.
So
that's a great channel.
I love that channel, and those guys put in a lot of work, and we're creating a nice like co-creator partnership here. And so this next video is about what happens when a society puts too much emphasis on safety. When safety becomes the main priority, and we kind of compare it to ancient civilizations and how when they thrived, what were they valuing? Yeah. And then, you know, what's the consequence? What are the unintended consequences of focusing on safety too much? And, you know, it's a lot of mental illness. It's a lot of destruction of society. And we might be seeing that unfold. It's a pretty relevant message for right now. Yeah. But, you know, it's told through these nice, cheerful little animations. You know,
they're not always so cheerful.
Yeah.
I think you do a pretty good job of capturing the reality of the dark shit too. You know, and like, I'm just thinking of like imagery of people sort of like glued to screens and kind of automatons or zombies, and you know, like that kind of thing. I think there's something about art. It has this ability to awaken something in you that may or may not have been, you know, in your conscious awareness before, you know? So it's like somebody sometimes seeing something like horrific is like powerful art. super powerful art, and it can, because it's like opening your eyes to like a dark reality that we need to see, like you have to see, you know. So I think that I would actually, that's kind of my flavor a little bit more. So I almost prefer it when it's like not all just like rainbows and butterflies, you know.
Well, yeah, you have to know the dark to know the light. And so I've been working to explore my own shadow side and some of these darker topics around the world, and kind of, you know, things that need to be known about.
Yeah.
And probably 2021 was the year that I really touched on a lot of topics of like, holy shit, this is a big thing going on, and this is why this is happening. Like, for instance, there was 2 videos that I did that got really popular, that were both kind of touching on things in our environment that were destroying our health. The one was about glyphosate, the pesticide, and you know, all these chronic illnesses that go along with in areas where you see that they're overusing that. And that was kind of a, you know, I didn't know if animation was going to be the best way to serve that message. So for probably half that video, it was like graphs and charts, but it got a really good response. And then I kind of did a similar follow-up on the effects of plastics on our reproductive health.
Phthalates.
Yeah, the phthalates.
Phthalates, yeah.
Yeah, and that one was very dark.
It's so dark. What's the lady's name?
Dr. Shauna Swan.
Yeah, I have her book in the queue on my to listen list on Audible, and I'd love to meet her and talk to her about it, but I heard about her through Joe Rogan's podcast.
She's super nice, and she'd probably do she's in New York, but she'd probably do a podcast.
Yeah, I'll be there in I don't know, maybe like August or September. So
yeah, she's really nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make that happen. Try to hit Alex Gray up over there too, because he's in New York, I think.
Yeah, you know, all these people are surprisingly responsive. Like, if you emailed like 3 ex-presidents, you might get 1 response.
Right.
It's pretty wild. Like, you know, if you email, I think email is the number one thing that they use. Like, because you get a ton of DMs, kind of comments. Twitter's like I don't go on Twitter, but like, it's hard to sift through the comments. But if you can get one of their emails, there's a good chance that you'll get a response.
Yeah, that's always that'll be my first plan of action. What would be the, I don't know, secondary plan of action? Because like I hate the idea of being like sucked into social media like full time and making it like grinding on social media to try to make that the way that you can connect with other people. I guess Twitter is pretty cool because you can DM somebody, right? And so that's, I don't know. I just have never really spent any time on Twitter, and I just already know before having to do that it's just like this toxicity waiting for me.
Yeah. Like, you know, there's a dark side and a light side to social media. I've been good at using it for the good of it, where I kind of do this post and ghost, where I don't get caught up in the comments. I like to read comments, and, you know, there's a lot of genuine, especially on Instagram, there's a lot of good comments, but you know, when I go on Facebook, it's a lot of toxic stuff. So we just do post and ghost.
Right.
And yeah,
especially because people might, the content may or may not be polarizing for, you know what I mean? People have like their take on it, and then they want to argue with other people who think differently on it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going down the cesspool of the comments seems like,
well, it's fun to argue sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned Academy of Ideas and collab you're doing with them, and I like that channel because they take really kind of complex ideas and nuanced like deep dives into stuff that's like really worth talking about and learning about. So to bring that, what I see is so cool about your channel, part of it is it makes things accessible for people, because you can now visualize it. Now you're entertained, and in a world where attention span's lower than ever, and you know, it's like you're always looking for that instant dopamine hit or whatever, to just even listen to a 5-minute audio clip, even if it's profound,
right,
you'll get distracted. You know, people just get distracted.
Yeah.
And so to put like something stimulating visually to it, it keeps people in there, it keeps them looped in, and then they can follow the idea, and then maybe that idea can actually plant a seed and like have a deeper impact in the bigger picture, right?
Right. And we are getting this shorter attention span, but who knew that there'd be this massive rise in podcasts?
Yeah.
You know, that's extremely, like,
It's the opposite,
I listen to so many podcasts, and when I see a podcast that's like 45 minutes, I'm like, oh, that's not very long.
Totally.
If I see one that's 3 hours, I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, exactly. That's so strange that I don't bat an eye at like committing to a 3-hour conversation, either to have one or to listen to one. I don't bat an eye, like, because I'm engaged, like I'm into it. I'm not distracted. It's like and even if I'm listening to the podcast while I'm driving or I'm doing something else, I'm still into it. And unless I get busy doing something else, then I'll re-listen or I'll turn it off. But I feel like you're right. It is kind of surprising because I don't know, TikTok's the perfect example of just like, well, there's next.
There's two very different ways that we interact with content on social media. There's the TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram way, where you're kind of like mindlessly scrolling and you're inundated with things that you didn't consciously curate. You didn't pick these things. So the things that work on those platforms are very much like, they're stimulating, they're quick to get your attention, and there's something that you didn't really even know you wanted to see until you saw it. You're like, wait, what's that guy doing? Oh, he's trying to climb a tree. He's going to jump off the tree. Okay, I need to see how this ends. And if he doesn't jump off the cliff in 2 seconds, you're like, all right, next video.
Yeah.
But with things like what I love about YouTube is it's a conscious choice to pick that content. They curate a big, like, a couple hundred videos for you, but it's up to you to click on that thing, and it's your choice. So you're more committed. And so my content doesn't do so well on like the other ones like TikTok, Instagram, because you're scrolling, you're not ready to watch a mass psychosis video. You want to see the twerk video.
Right.
And but if you're locked in on YouTube, you're like, oh wait, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
It's a much different interaction.
And I think when people are on the platform, like you're saying, they're in the mode of like, they kind of know it's not going to be a 30-second gig, right? And then on to the next. It's usually like, if you're on YouTube watching videos, you're probably more committed to like actually watching, unless you like got music on in the background or something like that, like it's probably a more engaging thing, which is cool. And it makes a lot of sense why your channel resonates on YouTube. So there's, you mentioned trying to go deeper into like not just the dark stuff, but like the real stuff, the stuff that we really need to talk about, that we really need to make probably more accessible for people, right? Give me like an example of what you mean, or what's the what direction have you been pulled into, like more recently in the last, since like maybe COVID, like where have you found yourself gravitating more towards, like where you're interested, where you want to meet and collaborate with these other people, or you want to bring art to the voice of what other people have said?
Well, like I said, last year has been touching on quite a few dark issues, and I've been going back and forth between a really dark episode that's like a uncomfortable truth that we have to face, or something really light that's more about creation and positivity. And I've been leaning more towards like the positivity. I've been shying away from anything too political, and because it's just draining for me to work on something that's so dark. So the video coming out tomorrow is about ancient civilizations, and that's just a fun, awesome topic, and it gets you really curious. It talks about like Atlantis and catastrophes, and it kind of gets your mind working about like how all these anomalies have happened in our past that the mainstream narrative doesn't account for. And so that's kind of an exciting. I love drawing those like ancient civilizations, and a cool like a half buried like Easter Island man or something. So
what do they call him, Molai or something like that? And is this your video with Randall?
This is
with Uncharted X, right?
Uncharted X.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on Patreon.
So I met Ben from Uncharted X on a Randall Carlson trip, and we really got along well, and he's done some great work. So the collaboration seemed pretty obvious.
Yeah, I haven't watched that full. I think I saw it. It's in the queue, like it's something I'm definitely gonna watch.
Like it's a good presentation.
I've heard of the channel, and I think I've maybe watched a video or two in the past, so I'm definitely interested. And you mentioned something, I'm glad you brought him up, Randall Carlson, and the trip that you were on is how you got connected with this guy. So that to me is one of the, like, I mean, it makes sense why you've done videos with him and why you're doing this one with Uncharted X, because to me it's peak curiosity for me, and also very, I think, relevant. Like, and you could make I guess the case that it's maybe heavy or dark content. Just in the sense that, like, if you look into the past, then you don't have to look for too long to realize, like, well, every civilization's come to an end, you know?
Right.
And then you start to listen to guys like Randall, and you start to get more of a sense that, things are the Earth's old, and, even us as like the species that we are now is fairly old. 300,000 years is quite a long time.
Exactly.
Compared to the fraction of time of Earth's history that we've been, like modern history or something like that, like post-agrarian Homo sapiens. And that's it. It's crazy, like, how we really are a species with amnesia,
right.
with this kind of
we are and we aren't, That's why some of these symbolic images, they really speak to us, from these ancient symbols and these old ideas from myths. They resonate with us, like something like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. It really it takes hold of our entire culture's attention, because it touches on these ancient ideas that are kind of in our ancestral memory, and in the modern day, we have a very short-term memory, because it seems like things that are happening this week are, going to cause the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then next week we're on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next week, it's like every single week it's a new end of the world.
Right.
But it's when you really zoom out, you realize how small and insignificant these things are. Like you said, 300,000 years, modern humans have existed. And by modern humans, I mean, like, you could take a baby from 300,000 years ago, human, bring him up in today, and they would probably, they would be unnoticeable, and vice versa. And so we have recorded history is only 6,000 years old, and that's not even that, in depth. But we have 6,000 years of recorded history. Modern humans have existed for 300,000 years. That means we're missing 98% of our record is just a mystery to us, complete mystery. And then if you think about it, in the last 150,000 years, there have been 16 catastrophes that could be mass extinction events.
Right.
These are like meteor impacts that are the equivalent of 1,000 atomic bombs going off at once. This would destroy every major city on Earth. And that's happened over 16 times, at least in the last 150,000 years. And so you got to think, if one of those hit today, what would be left in 1,000 years? All our hard drives would be gone. Everything in the cloud would be gone. All the metal. Have you ever seen a car in a front yard of somebody, like a hillbilly's front yard?
Yeah.
That thing rusts away after like 10 years. So all the metal would be gone. The only things remaining would be our great stone monuments, like the pyramids, like Mount Rushmore.
Unless it was at the impact site. But,
right.
But yeah, I feel you.
So, it just makes you wonder. And then you also have this other idea where just like 5 generations ago, you got to think about how your great-great-great-grandparents lived. There was no computers, there was no technology, electricity, running water. The wars were fought with bow and arrows and swords. And it only took a very short period of time to get to where we have all this technology. So technological advancement can happen very, very quickly, and it can also get erased entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So in this video, we kind of touch on the idea that, it is possible that an advanced civilization could have popped up quite quickly and then been erased to zero.
Just like you said, like how ours would be if there was one of these events.
Yeah.
It'd be the same scenario kind of playing out. And yeah, you have to ask the question, is civilization and kind of the life cycle of humanity, is it sort of cyclical rather than just linear?
Right. And we've been told that our human progress is this unbroken line from the Stone Age to now. And It's a pretty common idea. It makes sense. But when you look at all these anomalies, it's really like there's things that don't fit in with that smooth gradient. It could be sawtooth.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. And so, I'm going to push back a little just to stillman the other argument.
Sure.
Because like kind of the mainstream narrative, I think, is more, there was, dinosaurs got wiped away 60 million years ago, and we have the crater and the Yucatan, and it was catastrophic. I mean, the worldview pre-1970 wasn't that, right? So it took a lot of time to shift from gradualism to like there's no catastrophes at all. Everything changes very slowly to, okay, we proved that with the archaeological record and the geology of this crater and such, that the entire planet was rocked 60 million years ago, and then it took like a decade or two to shift that paradigm to like, okay, yes, catastrophes can happen, but still they only happen every 60 million, 100 million years. It doesn't really matter in the scope of like human lifetimes.
Right.
So we're not going to really think too hard about it. And that's why I think it's so important that you're working with, doing stuff to bring more awareness and also make things more palatable and easy to assimilate these ideas, like of Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, because there is anomalies, and there is a Younger Dryas climate event, and there is meltwater pulse 1b.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there are these things in the geology of the scablands and the canyons of the world, right? So it's like there are smoking guns, and there's a signature, there's a story that's kind of being told in the past, by and by the geology and these different like sort of domains of academia, where people are all kind of piecing together the puzzle, and we're like seeing through the glass darkly into the past, but we're trying to kind of make our best guess at what happened. And I think we're going through a bit of a paradigm shift now from like we did in the 70s with the dinosaur hypothesis. This Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is, I think, hopefully forcing people to reconsider and kind of like reorient our perspective about the human story and about our past. And if you can understand more about that, then it can reframe your perspective of the now and the future, right? And like, what are our priorities really? We've got like right now, specifically with Ukraine and all this, you've got Russia, China, the US, you've got like these mega powers and all this like tension and conflict, and all of our nukes pointed at each other, for fuck's sakes. Like we've got like this complete separateness, this paradigm of the other, like when in reality, we're all spinning around a ball of gas 90 million miles away, flying through infinity, like completely vulnerable in a shooting gallery of cosmic proportions. So what Carlson's doing, what guys like Graham Hancock are doing, I think is super important work to sort of wake us up to the bigger picture. I mean, and guys like what Carl Sagan has done,
Right.
and like just being able to get a picture of Earth in the 60s, like what that's been able to do, and the gradual shift of the collective consciousness about being a human on Earth, like being a cell as part of this whole body that's the third planet from the sun, right?
Yeah.
And like reorienting to that perspective, like, yeah, and we also pass through a meteor stream twice a year,
Right.
And there's like all these there's a bigger scale to all of this.
Right.
And it's hard for a little like primate with thumbs to
it's so hard to wrap your mind around. But when you go to some of these sites where there were catastrophes, the Earth is covered in scars. All you have to do is look at the moon and see how often the moon doesn't have vegetation and stuff. So you can see it's just all potholes and meteor crash sites. And when you go to these sites, it just makes you feel so small. When I was up in the Scablands with Randall Carlson, we were driving around, and we all throughout these Scablands, it's kind of like these like flat lands with just low grass. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there'll be a boulder that's the size of a 3-story house, just in the middle of this empty field that has nothing. And you gotta, people probably drive by that millions of times and don't think twice about it. But when you really look at these giant stones, it's like, how did this get here? This doesn't fit in with the landscape at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out that these stones were ripped with a great amount of energy out of a mountain hundreds of miles away. And then they were carried on an iceberg that landed here, and then the iceberg melted, and that's how that rock got here. Well, then you got to think, how big was that iceberg that brought a rock that's the size of a 3-story house here? Okay, that iceberg had to be bigger than an oil tanker. And how powerful was that water flow to get that iceberg here?
Yeah, how much volume do you need to even just have that?
Then you sit there and you think, okay, there's no water in this area now. So at one point there was thousands of feet of water moving with an incredible amount of energy through this area. It's so hard to wrap your mind around, but it's hard to deny the evidence.
Because there's a boulder.
And then you kind of just look at the terrain and there's clear watermarks. It's clearly like,
so that's why it's the Scablands, right?
Yeah, if you can get up there, it's really cool, and I highly recommend Randall Carlson's tours. They're a blast.
Yes and yes. So I'm planning on being up there in the Northwest in July, but and if I could, rendezvous with Randall at some point, that would be a dream come true. I'd love to sit down and talk to him.
I think he's doing a tour up there in April. I think Graham Hancock might be on that one too. So
yeah, maybe I have to reorient my plans a little bit. If I could get up there in April and meet those guys, that'd be ideal, and maybe to even have a conversation with both of them.
Randall is like the king of podcasts.
Yeah,
he's great.
Yeah, he has a podcast, Cosmographia, if anyone wants to check it out. But Rogan's podcast with him and Graham together, those are like the great episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience, in my opinion. Those are like the best.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for the things that Joe Rogan has done, where he's exposed me to like just these people that I would never have known about, like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock.
Yeah.
And then I've taken those podcasts and I've gone down a rabbit hole, read their books, and so I know Joe's receiving quite a bit of flack right now.
Yeah, but I mean,
I hope I don't get canceled for supporting Joe.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation to be had here about censorship and cancel culture, and kind of the awakening and all the shit that's going down, where it's hard to it's harder when you have a big platform, like an audience. So I can see, like, when you get to your phase, or especially Joe's phase, it's like you're under a massive spotlight. So, it's got to weigh on you pretty heavy. But where I'm at, like, now, it's easy for me to just like rattle off whatever the fuck I want to say, right? Like, and it feels good to kind of have that freedom, and it's something that I feel like we should try and protect. Like, and I'm trying to be, earnest and diligent on opening my ears more and listening to what other people's signal is, and really like feeling into like, am I married to this idea just because I've like identified with it, or is it just an idea, and should I be changing this idea for a better idea? But yeah, like this, I think that's honestly something that's if I have a strength, that might be one of them.
That's a good sense of self-awareness.
Well, the reason I say that is because I grew up in something like a cult. Like, I grew up in a fundamentalist Mormon town in Arizona, on the border of Arizona and Utah.
Okay.
And it's like a few thousand people, and it's just like an offshoot.
What town?
It's called Colorado City. It's like in Arizona. So it's actually about an hour away from St. George, where my business is.
Okay.
But anyways, so you kind of have like, I don't know how familiar you are with Mormonism, but it's like a pretty big part of American history, and like this whole westward expansion was kind of pioneered in large part to Mormons settling Utah and whatnot. But there was an offshoot in the late 1800s of the LDS Church that sort of like broke away, because the LDS Church was like, no, we're not going to be polygamous anymore. Like we want to get statehood. We want to be more popular, and we kind of have to adapt to the times type of thing. And there's this kind of underground movement, I guess, where you get like all these like offshoots and fractures off of the main trunk of Mormonism, and these little communities form and things like that. Well, I was born and raised in one of those that kind of has its own like special lineage of like authority to do what they're doing, and like this kind of magic power to be doing God's will and on earth, and no one else has it like they have it. So anyways,
standard religion.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like it's actually it's not actually that special in the sense that it's very generic in that model, like in that framework of what I just laid out. But I grew up in so with that particular orientation, which, you know, stories around Jesus and needing to have, like, you know, somebody atone for my sins and being kind of like born into sin, and then like stories around Joseph Smith about like restoring this truth to the earth and translating a ancient artifact of a lost civilization called these golden plates that were supposed to be this like proof of this whole peoples and millions of people that existed in the Americas before European contact, and that's what the Book of Mormon's based on, and all this stuff, right? So when I had to eventually rip the Band-Aid off on that worldview when I was about 20, in large part due to a document that a wonderful guy by the name of Jeremy Reynolds put together. He's an ex-Mormon now, but he you know, basically compiled all this evidence. Like, well, what about all this? And it was like 80 pages of like problems with Mormonism, right? In the sense that, like, because if you don't have like, if you're building like on it's like a very extravagant thing that you're trying to protect this idea, and it's getting like more and more fragile, right? And like, if there wasn't this lost ancient civilization that, you know, called the Nephites or the Lamanites or whatever, that had these cities and all of these like chariots and bronze and, you know, golden plates and all of these things that just there's no evidence in the archaeological record for pre-European contact. Like, so for example, horses. Europeans brought horses over. And so to be writing about horses in a time that's supposed to be before Christ, you know, it's an anachronism. It doesn't really add up. And so anyways, he just compiled this document. I just did a podcast with him recently. I haven't released it yet, but that's the you know, flavor of all of that. Is like we dive into all that stuff, because that document helped me rip the Band-Aid off on that worldview. But what it did is it kind of cast me, in a sense, into chaos, you know, just pure chaos. Like, well, then what the fuck, man? Like, so all this stuff that everybody around me is telling me is real, and my parents and all the people I love and my friends, like everyone's kind of on this train. So now that I'm hopping off the train, what do I do?
Right.
And it feels like having the rug ripped out from under you, and, you know, you're kind of, for a while there.
It's like when Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead.
Exactly.
You know, it's quite a statement. But
it is.
You know, he was commenting on us moving away from religion tying us all together and having that common belief system. And, you know, there's some positive aspects to moving away from that dogma, but there's also very negative aspects. You know, you go into that chaotic state, and there is no such thing as atheism. You're going to find something to worship. Some people in our age worship celebrities, money, power, intellect. And, you know, there is something to be said about worshiping God. You know, it is a higher way to orient yourself. But yeah, that's kind of a side note.
Yeah, no, it's not that far on the side. It's very relevant. I think you're totally right. And it's kind of like losing your sense for meaning, right?
Right.
That's what God is dead. God is kind of the pillar of meaning.
Right.
It's like, well, why is any of this here? Who are we? I thought we were made in the image of God. Right. And like, we're here to, you know, to master our unruly flesh, and then like maybe make our way back to him and be saved from, and that's like this horrible state.
We've seen quite a rise in nihilism lately. You know, nothing matters. What's the point? I'm going to die anyways. I don't want to bring kids into this world. You know, it's like, it's a very dark, negative, dead end kind of point of view. Very much so. And I'm saying that from first person perspective. I've been in that. So that was kind of like 20 to 24, 25 for me. Yeah. Same timeline almost.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How old are you now?
33.
Okay, cool. So I'm 29, I'm turning 30 in a few months. But so for the, you know, I kind of had a rough go at it. And, you know, really like the first one of my mom's kids to like take that plunge and to try to go out and like figure out like something else, right?
There's a lot of ex-Mormons out here in San Diego.
Is there?
It's like the place they end up. Yeah, they're all on the beach surfing. And they're like, I can never go home.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, like, that's God, right? Like, get on the beach, just get in the waves, and
that's meaning in a lot of ways for people, but like it connects you to something tangible and real, and it's not like because I can articulate this story in these books, these sacred texts, or et cetera, it's more like an experiential gnosis of something that's very real, like the thing that's waving that ocean, whatever that you want to call that, right? The happening of the ocean, the thing that makes the ocean wave at you, and it's just waves are crashing on the beach. It's been happening so long that like the sand is just pulverized. It's just perfectly soft, and it's just a signature that it's telling a story that this happening has been playing out so much further back than you can wrap your little monkey brain around, and it will keep playing out so much longer than you can wrap your monkey brain around. That it's truth. It's just truth.
Yeah.
There's something real about that, so true about that. And even though I'm like a bad swimmer and like semi-scared of just like riding the wave, I know there's going to be a chapter in my life where I like take some time and jump in there and do that.
Hey, you look like you'd be natural in the water.
Thank you, but definitely not. It's like, part of it's because I just never got taught how to swim. Like there was this weird sort of culture. I mean, I already told you a little bit about what I grew up in, but like part of that was, there was, in my particular flavor of it, for some reason, they had a bit of an aversion to water. Like I remember hearing stories like, oh, you're on the devil's ground if you're in water and stuff. And so we were kind of encouraged not to go into deep water, and never got taught swimming lessons or anything like that. So it wasn't like a point of confidence for me. I feel more natural climbing. Like I was climbing trees as a little kid.
I've heard an analogy that water and the ocean is kind of like your subconscious. And the ocean's big and vast, and you can pull up some treasure from down there, or you can get swallowed up by a whale.
Yeah.
There's things lurking down there that you may not want to find.
Yeah, 100%. So the purpose of my tangent down into like my past, I guess, was to say that having the rug ripped out and having to start from zero, and God is dead, right? Going through the darkness and the kind of the chaos of a bit of nihilism, some really depressing emo music, and that kind of thing. Eventually, though, I was able to sort of like, stand on the shoulders of giants, men like Alan Watts. Like, thank God that this technology of this microphone existed while he was alive.
Right.
Because like, holy shit, that guy's got talk about an orator and a visionary and a philosopher, and like everything that you want to be, like, it's like treasure. It's like, thank you that exists in like an audio archive, that I can glean something from as a young man, like lost in trying to find meaning,
Right.
Like that's just, it was huge for me. And, other like Joe Rogan's podcast and connecting me to like actual tools, like open me up to try something like floating or yoga. And learning about who Wim Hof was and getting in cold water. Like these things sound so simple, but they actually can completely help you. Like if you integrate things like this into your life, can reorient that whole trajectory to where you're not just spiraling down deeper into the darkness, but you're on this like Jordan Peterson would say, like kind of clean your room first. And then like you're sort of like you're setting yourself up for what's next. So I hope that I have the ability to continue to see things that are beyond my current understanding and my current perspective and my current worldview, and adapt to what feels like true, what feels like real, because I've had to do that in the past. And so the first phase was kind of the Mormonism thing and shifting gears. But what I found, the next story I found, which is kind of the story that most people seem to be gravitating to, is this kind of cultural zeitgeist of like materialism and consumerism. And it's just like, chase the dollar, the almighty dollar, right? It's like, that's the thing. It's like, that's supposed to be the thing, go for the security, go for the safety, get that IRA.
And the people that do have it are miserable.
Yeah. And
like, wait, I thought that's what I was supposed to want.
Yeah, that should be the biggest red flag indicator. Like, okay, so all of the privileged, most wealthy people are dealing with, I mean, I think the highest demographic for suicide is like white males 25 to like 40 or something. It's like,
really?
I think I heard something about that once. But it's just like a higher risk demographic for suicide, which might just be
and
one.
Homelessness and drug overdose and prison and
yeah, it's rough. And there's a lot of I mean, it's easy to find like where people are struggling right now, and you can see kind of the side effects of how this system is played out. Like, and that's just the side effects on like our mental health and you know, what's going on to us collectively. But that doesn't say anything to like what's going on at the planet. Like, look at the ecocide that's happening and the destruction of the biosphere and the loss of biodiversity in the Amazon and the, you know, the pollution in the ocean, the plastic pollution and the overfishing of all the apex predators and like,
Yeah.
you know, all of this shit is, it's heavy, but I think it's also important to speak the truth, take stock of where things are. Like, that's part of sovereignty to me, is like, be aware of what it is, like, know the thing that it is. Because if you're just trying to like hide from the uncomfortable thing and you're trying to keep your reality kind of squishy and soft and your comfort zone around you, you're eventually going to create a prison where you can never leave this little bubble.
Right.
And you're kind of like, you're kind of helpless.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you are rediscovering God.
Yeah.
In a different, through these ice baths and journeys and
Yeah,
these kind of uncomfortable, new, unknown experiences.
That's a good way to. I think rediscovering God is a fair way to say it. Because there was a long time where, I mean, a few years where it was such a taboo idea. I couldn't even speak about the idea of God, like, without getting emotional or.
Well, there's a really quote I love from Rumi. I searched for myself and only found God. I searched for God and only found myself.
Yes.
And I think that's just like, it speaks to like that mirror of like, the closer you get to like who you are, the closer you get to God. It's like this geometry. It's like the symmetry.
Yeah, symmetry. That's a beautiful way to say that. Totally, I love that quote. I couldn't agree more, and that's why Alan Watts is like my favorite human, because he's helped me. He's helped me to pierce through that illusion of separation. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, he really points out like how there is no separation to things, and we have these very like concrete ideas of the way things are, and he'll very quickly just destroy that.
Yeah,
and in such an eloquent way that's very like, it doesn't put you off, and you're like, oh my God, yeah, that's. Everything I've known is wrong. And then he'll like rebuild you through the talk. And so by the end, you have this completely new perspective, and the old one is kind of like, you know, it's still there, but it's more irrelevant, and you can kind of see it for what it is.
Have you ever used, do you meditate at all, or do you use anything for meditation?
I meditate very rarely, and I probably should do it more, but I do a lot of fitness. Every morning, that's kind of like my routine. I'll do, I'll either go to the weight room, play soccer, jiu-jitsu, boxing. I kind of like to do all these like fairly intense things in the morning, and that does put me in a Zen state for the rest of the day.
Definitely. Yeah. I know exactly. That's why I like to climb. It's why I like hard yoga. Like, I totally love the space you get into after as well. I'm bringing up meditation because there's a meditation app called Waking Up, Sam Harris.
Oh yeah, I've done work for them.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I've worked
cool.
with Sam Harris.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So like,
I made their ad.
No shit.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you're like, I know them well. I've worked with Sam.
Yes.
So, I love his app. But I love it the most now. Like, what's really cool about it is it's evolved. I had the app and I went through his introductory meditation course when I think I was like backpacking. I think I was in Asia when I was doing it mostly, because I was like kind of like heavier into meditation then, and doing like Vipassana retreat and stuff. But it's evolved, and I think the coolest thing ever is he just added, because he brings in these different philosophers and different meditation teachers. It's not just Sam, right? There's like a whole theory section on the app where you can dive into all these different perspectives from really, really great teachers. And also a practice section where you can do guided meditations with all these different, and sit with these different, you know, masters of meditation, not just Sam Harris, who's also incredible. But the coolest thing ever is he just collaborated with the Alan Watts Foundation or whatever, and they just got the entire Alan Watts archive on Waking Up.
Wow.
But it's organized. It's very organized by different topics, and I think there's like 19 different Alan Watts series, and each one has one or multiple lectures. So it's it's just a bottomless well of wisdom there. It's really, really amazing. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just plugging that, even though obviously they don't sponsor. I don't have any sponsors or anything, but
well, I'll kind of soft announce something that I've never let anybody know, but I've formed a good relationship with Mark Watts, Alan Watts' son.
Oh, yeah.
He lives pretty close by. And we thought, there is something really special about After School plus Alan Watts. They complement each other really well. And we thought, I was like, why don't we make a book? Just a beautiful book with the best teachings from Alan Watts with my art, like a graphic novel. And so we've been pursuing that idea. I'm not so sure. I think that will happen eventually, but that's going to be cool when that comes out.
That's so cool.
And we've also been discussing other projects like NFTs, which, everybody has their opinion about NFTs. But, imagine like a cool, like immersive landscape with like after school art. And then you're in this, you hear this like cool immersive music. And then you hear Alan Watts' voice as you walk through this like cool animated world.
So it's kind of like within virtual reality or something like that.
Something like that. We've been kind of discussing ideas. And I've been getting a little bit into NFTs, slowly. And
it makes sense as an artist, but specifically, like you've already kind of done a good job of bringing your art form into the digital space. So I think that's a natural evolution for you.
Yeah, I have like 1 foot in the NFTs and then 1 foot out because, well, just to say one thing about them, I don't want to just sell JPEGs.
Right.
I want them to at least fund something in the real world that is amazing. So one of the projects that I've been really excited about is Randall Carlson's Skool. He's going to build a school on like 3,000 acres in around Tennessee. And we've been talking about this. I was like, maybe we can use these NFTs to like fund the school. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that would be
get
epic.
behind some real project.
Yeah.
So that's still in the early phases, but I do see potential for funding projects that way.
Yeah, I do as well. There's a podcast couple. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Future Thinkers podcast. You should check out that podcast. It's really cool. I mean, they've introduced me to some really powerful thinkers, really, really powerful thinkers. And they were doing this podcast, I don't know how many years, but quite a while, at least like 7 years. And the podcast sort of evolved like from them talking about like thinking about the future and talking about to people who were like thinking deeply about like, well, where are we going as a culturally, collectively, like where are we actually headed? And they kind of got, there's a lot of ways I could go with Future Thinkers because there's so many cool things there, including like Game B, which we should talk about. But they decided to put what they'd been talking about on the podcast into practice and to create something which you might call like a prototype of a new sort of like community or some sort of like intentional way to approach how humans should maybe live in relationship to the land and in relationship to each other, and not in a way that's like kind of backwardsy.
Like a cult.
Yeah, like a cult. Yeah. Exactly. This just started a cult. But like, anyways, I'll loop back to this Game B idea. But they bought this land up in British Columbia, a couple 100 acres. It's supposed to be gorgeous. I'm planning on being up there in the summer to try to hopefully meet them and see the land and like talk to them and get them on the podcast.
That's like the flex now, to get land and then start a permaculture farm.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, but the thing is it's also kind of like blank canvas kind of creative potential as well, like where you can co-create something with other people who want to think beyond just the narrative of like suburbia and kind of like the delicate infrastructure of our current civilization.
That's the idea of a parallel structure. It's a community that exists within a larger system, and it kind of emerges. It's like this beautiful little like utopian world that it could exist within a totalitarian state.
Sure. Yeah. So kind of like a permeable cell where it's not just cut off from the world.
And I hear so many people talking about that vision that like, oh, you know what, I want to buy like some land and then I just want to create my own little world. And I have that dream too.
I think everybody, because
Yeah.
I think anybody who feels some sort of dissatisfaction when they walk down the street and there's like garbage, or when they, they can't see the mountains, or like like, there's so many things about the way that we've done civilization in our society where, like, chances are you live in a box next to a bunch of other boxes that are almost identical. Maybe we've like the veneer, like the shiny thing on the surface is slightly different colors for different houses or
Right.
boxes, but
Yeah.
really you're getting like
And it's hard.
some walls to
It
exist
puts
in.
you in that box consciousness.
It does.
You know, that shape. Have you ever been in like a building that is a very unique kind of curvy structure with like all sorts of like cool,
like roundness to it and
yeah,
flow.
like in Tulum or something, with these, like that box shape. It's very like, it's a container of your thoughts.
Mhm.
And then, you look at a box screen, and at an office, you're not even supposed to dress like a box.
Yep.
So
It's kind of like a manifestation of the box mindset that
Right.
we have. I mean, and it goes all the way down to English, like all the way down to just like our words and the kind of like way that we perceive everything is through that kind of lens.
Right.
And John Vervaeke, who's a guy I learned about through either Future Thinkers or somebody like that. Like he's an amazing thinker, but he is talks about being able to take the if your worldview were spectacles, could you take them off and actually see the spectacles themselves, instead of when you're wearing the spectacles, you're seeing through the spectacles. And so you're not actually seeing the spectacles, but what you're seeing is via the spectacles, right? So it's like it's actually influencing dramatically what you're seeing, but you don't realize, if you're just wearing them all the time,
Right.
that's changing your view. So how can we take it off, take that break, step back, reset? To me, that's what the flow tank's for, but it's also what retreat is for. It's what
Right.
psychedelics can be for. And I think what these guys are trying to do, like what they've done with their podcast, and then what they're trying to do in Canada, is like have a canvas to like step way back and be like,
Right.
okay, first principles thinking here, like what should this be like? And they're one of dozens, if not hundreds, of projects which you might call like proto Bs. Or so back to Game B for a second. So the idea, if you've never heard of it, okay, so it kind of got started by this guy Jordan Hall and Jim Rutt and Brett Weinstein, like this kind of the beginnings of sort of a lot of like kind of what led to the intellectual dark web kind of.
I'm a big big fan of Brett.
Yeah, Brett's
Weinstein.
awesome. Brett's great. But Jordan Hall and Jim Rutt specifically, I think, are the two guys that sort of coined the term Game B. Might have been Jordan Hall. And the idea is simple. It's like Game A is a game we're playing. It's like kind of the collective game of civilization, of kind of like what's been playing out since the shift to agriculture and sort of this like ramping up, leading through the Industrial Revolution and whatnot to where we're at now. And Game A is finite. It's got a specific. It's bounded. It has an end point. So it's going to self-terminate at some point, just by the nature of the way that the game is. So like for various reasons, one of them being like you can't have infinite growth in a finite space, and Game A relies on that type of growth. It was like ramped up through like the Industrial Revolution, where it's like new world, America, like free reign, like colonialism, free reign. It's like just turn it all the way up for growth without really any brakes built into onto the train. So, I mean, we're kind of debasing the substrate by which our civilization actually relies. So like if you ramp up capitalism and economics to the point where you end up with a tragedy of the commons and a, collapse of the biosphere in, by, let's say, overfishing of tuna, which are an apex predator, then you get like kind of, ecosystem collapse and, all the different things. That's just one tiny detail. So Game B is kind of like a space that kind of mainly exists online, I think, but also people are doing stuff like these guys in Canada where they're trying to do stuff in the real world now. But it's kind of like this space to try to get creative, and it's like a think tank space to where it's like how can we think about what would be the thing that grows next, that comes next, that emerges to replace game A. And instead of saying exactly what game B would be like, I mean, what it would actually be, because as soon as like the DAO that can be named is not the DAO, right? Like you can't say what it is, but you can maybe speak to like what it might be like and the qualities, right? So for example, game A is fragile in its nature. Game B would be anti-fragile. So it would actually get stronger when it's stressed versus collapsing, right? Like it would be decentralized potentially instead of necessarily like completely centralized. Like what I mean by that is there'd be like a bottom up type of power distribution instead of a top down, like a hierarchy where you got like one person at the top kind of, or a central like locus of power that sort of dictates what the collective does. Like think, Z or Putin or whatever, right? And then, there's all these other facets to like how you can compare and contrast the two things. And it's just this really interesting space where people are actually thinking about this, because whether we like it or not, the circumstances are sort of forcing that conversation, like even if you wanted game A to persist, which I don't know why anyone in their right mind would, because look around, like there's so many, like the collective psychosis, right? Like, and the collective, suicide epidemics and the opiate crisis and the pollution problem and the climate change catastrophe and et cetera, et cetera. Like even if we wanted to keep things how they were going, we can't. It's got a finite point to it. It might not be necessarily in the next couple of years. I mean, it may not. It might be further out. But at some point, the thing it can't continue. And so It's like why is Elon Musk trying to get to Mars? Do you see what I mean? Because he understands that. He understands that like we've got all of our eggs in this one basket that's pretty fragile. So I think that's a really interesting space, and there's some really, really intelligent people thinking about that. And to me, it's like a frontier of creativity. That's like the ultimate, frontier for human potential and human creativity.
Well, if this was a simulation, this would be the level that you'd want to probably play the game at. This is like, right on the edge of when we figure things out.
Yeah, I guess. Which I can't really prove to you it's not a simulation.
I don't know what to do with that information, but
yeah,
just keep living.
Yeah, it's the same kind of argument around free will. Like it's like Sam Harris talks about quite a bit. It's like I can't really prove that I have free will. I've the felt sense that I have free will, right? But
Sam's a big proponent of consciousness. He talks a lot about consciousness, and he also is a big pusher of the argument that there is no free will. And it's a very logical argument, and it makes a lot of sense, and you can say it at a dinner party and sound really smart. But I think that if you say that there is no free will, then there is no point to consciousness. What's the point of consciousness? So that's a big contradiction that I see in his logic or in his thinking, because if everything's just cause and effect, then what's the point of being conscious? We're just a we're just a leaf blowing in the wind. What was the point of giving that leaf consciousness?
Yeah, but that's like saying, what's the point of music, right? It's not to achieve something per se. It's just to listen. It's to dance,
right?
So you could take the perspective that like, even if there's no free will, you're still here. This is still happening. This is the experience. This is your conscious experience, right? And you're part of the dance. You're part of this happening, and it just is. So it's in a way it's beautiful, and in a way it also kind of takes the edge off, because it's like, well, this is all going on with or without my forcing it.
It does take the edge off on certain like atrocities that happen, or like when there's a murder, or when somebody does something that you would typically, I hate you. You can put it in the context of like, okay, their action was the sum of, it was the final result of thousands of things, infinite things that came before.
Yeah.
So you can't blame that person for that action. I like that in that view of I think it's a healthier way to view people. Like, if you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off and flicks you off.
Yeah.
Maybe my old reaction would have been to flick that person off right back. But with that kind of Sam Harris, no free will approach, I'll look at that person and say, oh, you know what? They had a rough day.
Yeah. Gives you more empathy.
Or maybe they're trying to rush their kid to the hospital and I was in their way. Or maybe they were just treated terribly as a kid.
Sure.
And they're just letting out that energy on me and it's misplaced. I can look at that and be more at peace, you know. But I am a believer in free will. And there's a quote from Carl Jung I come back to quite a bit. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become.
Yeah.
And I think that sums up, in a way, the idea really well. It's like, you can believe that you are all these things that have happened to you and that's why you are the way you are. But you can also make a decision right now to be something and go on a different path.
Be sovereign.
And you are what you choose to become. You can make a choice and become that thing. So if you don't believe that there's any free will, then maybe you don't have free will. And if you do, maybe you kind of do have free will.
Yeah, I like that. So when I say I can't prove I don't have free will, I don't think that it paralyzes me from taking action and from trying to be sovereign, create authentically, and orient myself towards ikigai. You know,
right?
Like, and that's to me feels like the funnest game to play for now. So that's what I'm going to try to do. But when I say I'm going to try to do, I understand that that's a loaded statement,
right?
Like, because you're assuming that there's an I'm separate from everything else that can just do, you know, like force this thing, where it's like, okay, but if we zoom in on that and we put it under the magnifying glass, I is a relationship. I is really defined by my environment. There's no subject without the background. Just like as an artist, you know this very well, right? You have to, the whole thing makes the thing come to life, the front and the back,
right?
You know? So for there to be an I, for there to be a Christian, for there to be me, there has to be this environment around me that kind of informs who I am.
Right.
And also, in order for me to take action, there's no such thing as a self-made man. There's no such thing as like something separate from the rest. Where it's a complex environment.
Exactly.
Everything's hooked to everything else.
That's why there's that whole cause and effect argument also falls on its face a little bit, because you're saying that one thing causes another thing, but really there's no separation between the two things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's I guess kind of the whole point. Like free will to what? Will to do. Like I'm free to choose. I'm free to knock on the table or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the thing. But the thing I'm getting at is that the thing that gives rise to action is also hooked to everything else. So it's, to me, one of those questions that's it's interesting, it's fun, like you said, it's fun to talk about at dinner or whatever, right? Or over some whiskey or something. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really, whether there's the free will or there's not, my felt experience, my subjective felt sense of this is the same. And so that's why I like that Carl Jung quote a lot, and that's why I orient myself. I really gravitate to things like Stoicism and this philosophy of like, focus on what you can control, like what's in your realm to worry about, you know. And you can't control what the followers or the subscribers say when you put out content, right?
And like Jordan Peterson talks about is like, you know, if the world's out of chaos, if the world's in chaos, start small. Just make your bed. Yeah. You know, what can you control? Mm-hmm. And if you can't control, you know, just making your bed, then you obviously can't go and control your community. You know, you have to start close and move wider. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. So I think it's just like the simulation thing. It's like whether this is all simulated or whether it's based reality doesn't really change that we're here.
Right.
Doesn't change that fact. And so it doesn't really change how I choose or not, you know, feel like I choose what I do in this moment, you know. But I think I like your perspective, and it's definitely more it feels a lot better. It feels a little bit more divine or something to be like, this is a mystery. This is all happening, and we're sovereign beings with the ability to choose what we do in this moment. And that feels like it radiates truth to me. It feels good. And whether it's just the felt sense of that or whether that's really how it is, it doesn't really matter, because when I embody that story, it feels good, and it brings me more to a place of inspired action, you know? So, yeah.
Well, well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, and we've been already at this for a couple hours.
Let's wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I want to shout out your channel again. So After Skool, for anybody listening who hasn't actually checked it out yet. And yeah, man, I'd love to see any collabs you do with Mark Watts. That was his name, right?
Yeah.
His son.
Alan Watts' son.
Yeah. And, I'm excited to see what other content you put out in the future, but I'm really stoked about what you've done so far. And, I think that what you're doing and the content that you're choosing through your free will is really, I mean, it's definitely had an impact on me, but I can tell just by the wider distribution of it that it's connecting with others too. And I love to see that art come to life. And like, just real quick before I wrap this, we've been doing this thing. This will be the second year in a row now at True North Float, where we do this thing called Art from the Void, where we give local artists in the community 3 free floats, and they come in and they like experience the float tank and they connect with the void, which is like it's like before creation, there's the void, right? It's like the potential
it's like
for
the birth
all
experience.
Yeah, it's like the potential for everything to come out of, right?
Yep.
Waiting to be made manifest. And so
It's paradise.
Yeah. And so to be in the void is like an incredible experience. That's why I'm passionate about floating. But to get artists in the tank is super cool, because they come out inspired, and then, you know, a couple floats later, then they create art. So next weekend on Saturday I'll be back in Utah, and we're doing a gallery show with all the art that's been created this round. And you just kind of like get to hang out with the artists and see it up on the walls. So I think it'd be super cool if you're ever in that neck of the woods, if you're ever coming through Utah or anything, I'd love to open the door and get you in the float tank.
Yeah, I was just there with Randall Carlson earlier this year. So
Missed the boat on that.
you got some cool geology out there.
It's nutty.
Yeah, the canyon lands and the arches.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff.
Eastern Utah, all of it. It's insane. That's my favorite part of the world geographically.
So you're in western
Southwest.
Southwest.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not too far.
It's closer to Vegas. So it's only like 2-hour drive from Vegas.
That's fun.
Yeah, but I'm technically
Vegas, you need a float.
yeah. Technically, I'm not there, because like, I mean, I'm there, but I'm also around now.
You're nowhere and you're everywhere.
Yeah, I'm a nomad now at this point. So hopefully I can, rendezvous with some other cool people that we've talked about, like Randall and Graham. That'd be sweet.
That'd be awesome.
Well, man. Yeah, I appreciate you.
Thanks
appreciate
for
you making this
Appreciate
happen.
it.